Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Daily Friends Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer. Sorry for those of you watching live. We started a little bit late today because we were all rushing around Joburg. We had an in-person meeting for the first time in a while, as we all now work from home. So anyway, it was good to see the colleagues, but that's why we're a little bit late. I am joined today by Mr. Marius Roodt. Marius, how are you doing?
How's Nick? How are you?
Yeah, no, I'm all right. Wired on a lot of coffee and free sandwiches. Herman, how are you?
I'm good. It was nice to see you guys in more than two dimensions.
Yes, and Herman is now speaking to us from the fortress of our great leader, John Endres.
Yes, or as Dick Cheney would call it, an undisclosed location.
Yes. All right. So, first topic today, and I don't think I've quite worked out what clickbaity headline we're going to have for this one, but we'll figure that out after the show. That's our problem, not yours. And my apologies to anyone who gets caught by the clickbait, but it's what you got to do on YouTube. Our story today comes from, mostly from the Daily Maverick, but also from other sources as well. And the headline reads, at least on the Daily Maverick, ZANU-PF, which is, of course, Zimbabwe's ruling party, trounced in Zimbabwean parliamentary and municipal elections. So recently, a large number of seats became vacant, mostly due to the collapse of the MDC in Zimbabwe, which was formerly the main opposition party there. And some elections were held, which are being seen sort of as a dry run for what might happen in the 2023 election, which is the next big election in Zimbabwe, of course. And ZANU-PF went really hard in these elections. They brought out Robert Mugabe Jr., Robert Mugabe's son, to campaign for the party. There was also, of course, lots of accusations of ZANU-PF attacking and intimidating people. There were apparently gangs of people going around with machetes, threatening people, attacking opposition figures. At least one person was killed. One person died in Mangagwa's, that's the president's hometown of Kwekwe, when some ZANU-PF aligned gang members wielding machetes, stones, and spears besieged an opposition rally and attacked the supporters. The opposition, of course, accused them of gangsterism, rightly so. Anyway, the results came in, and out of the 28 contested parliamentary seats, 19 of them were won by the opposition, despite all of the intimidation and the violence, and probably a little bit of rigging, straight up rigging as well. The main winner of these seats was Nelson Chisima's Citizens Coalition for Change, Chamisa, which is also known as the Triple C, which seems to be emerging as the new opposition party in Zimbabwean politics after the MDC, which split and is falling apart, is kind of going by the wayside now. So let me start with you, Marius. This has been framed as a big defeat for ZANU-PF, but I mean, it wasn't that well reported, but what can we figure out from what we've read on this topic?
Yeah, so it's normal, a lot of breathless, reporting on how this is the end of ZANU-PF and so on, because the CCC won 19 out of the 28 seats. But actually, out of these 28 parliamentary seats, 20 had been held by the opposition before. So I think the big story of this actually is this is the end of the MDC, probably, not so much ZANU-PF. And ZANU-PF actually picked up 2 seats that it didn't hold before. It seems one was a former MDC seat and the other one was held by an independent. So ZANU-PF has actually got more seats overall now than it did before this election. So while I think it definitely shows that the MDC is gone and this Triple C or CCC, I'm not too sure how Zimbabweans refer to this party, they definitely seem to be the primary opposition. But I think this has been a problem with Zimbabwean politics for a while. The MDC has split a number of times. The same thing happened in 2008 when the opposition was probably the closest in post-independence Zimbabwean history to overthrowing ZANU-PF, where Morgan Tsvangirai, the candidate for the MDC, actually got more votes than Rob Mugabe. But in the second round, there was lots of intimidation, vote rigging, violence. And so Morgan Tsvangirai actually pulled out of the second round. But there was another MDC faction from a guy, Arthur Mutumbara, I think his name was, who'd been involved in that election. So he split the opposition vote. It's happened a couple of times. There was Thokozani Kupe, I think he was another MDC guy who'd also split the vote before. There's a number of other guys. I think Welshman Ube was one. I think that's been the problem in Zimbabwean politics. The opposition's always split. There've always been problems with opposition. They haven't been able to mount one single challenge to ZANU-PF. And in Zimbabwe, they don't use a proportional representation system like we do. They still use the Westminster system. So if you split the vote, if you get 2% of the vote, you're not getting into parliament. In Zimbabwe, you need to have quite a, single united group to take on the government to actually get close to overthrowing them. So it's I think the analysis has been a bit lacking with this. As I said, it took all three of us a while now to figure out actually what this did mean for Zimbabwean politics, and it's definitely it's definitely not. I don't think ZANU-PF is probably that worried with it. I mean, they're going to. I think they'll watch the Citizens Coalition with some trepidation, but it's the MDC that's gone, and I think it's actually a bit sad. The MDC has been quite a figure in Southern African opposition politics since the late 1990s. And Morgan Tsvangirai is a guy I think that the history of Southern Africa will probably remember quite fondly. But he obviously passed away a couple of years ago. But MDC he started it. He was a main driving force behind it. He was an important opposition figure
and that guy suffered. I mean,
exactly.
He had ZANU-PF spies trying to sleep with him,
Exactly.
and he almost married one. There was an attempt to assassinate him, and that killed his first wife. I mean, the dude went through a lot before.
During the 2008 elections, there was those famous photos of him coming out of the police station, and his eyes were swollen shut. His head had to be shaved to give him stitches. And this was, the main opposition leader in the country. And, it's actually a disgrace. That's how the establishment in this country supported ZANU-PF and Robert Mugabe. If I think a large part of the reason why Zimbabwe is in the mess it is in is because of South Africa's support and predominantly the ANC support and Thabo Mbeki support. But I want to say it's interesting how you said that Morgan Tsvangirai suffered because lots of people were trying to sleep with him, Nick. That is quite an interesting way to use
yeah. So I didn't put that very clearly, but he broke off an engagement with a fiance that he had because
I think there were a lot of honeypots. I think that's what you were trying to say.
It was revealed that she was probably a spy for ZANU-PF.
Yeah.
Pretty hectic stuff. Okay, so Herman, we often in South Africa look across the board at Zimbabwe and we see a lot of ourselves in there and kind of the dark, painful road that South Africa could take. Of course, there's a lot of differences. The army in Zimbabwe is much more powerful and has much more integrated into the state. Of course, the ZANU-PF is supported strongly by the ANC. Not super strongly, but strongly enough to make their life easier most of the time. And that definitely helps them to stay in power. I think they're even closer to the Chinese, in fact, than the South African government is, despite the fact that we're supposedly part of BRICS and these other organizations. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's two ways you can look at this election here. One is that despite all of the violence, the intimidation, the brutality, the opposition still managed to win most of these seats back. And the other way to look at it is to say that the ballot box is completely a joke now in Zimbabwe and that ZANU-PF is gaining ground. What lessons should South Africans draw from what's going on in Zim at the moment?
Well, firstly, that breathless journalism is usually quite useless. If your narrative is that, shock, dry run for 2023 elections, opposition party wins 61% of the vote, and then you delve a bit deeper and you see that ZANU-PF actually picked up seats, if that's your headline takeaway, then really, I mean, you are either stupid or lazy. So I mean, it's shocking. When you get these narratives propounded or promoted by the media, it's worthwhile to do some digging and figure out what's actually going on, or just read the Daily Friend, watch the Daily Friend show. So that's the first thing people should take away from this, is that don't trust the breathless journalism chasing the next beautiful little convenient narrative. The second thing is that personality politics is alive and well in Southern Africa, well, at least in Zimbabwe, which is, I mean, it's worrying. It's really tragic that for the opposition, at least, and for people who believe in things like human dignity and democracy and stuff like that, that once Morgan Tsvangirai departed the scene, the MDC collapsed. Then once Nelson Chamisa established his own party, the MDC collapsed. Even further, what remained of it is so the fact that you don't have a clear ideological challenge to ZANU-PF, I think, is something quite sad and quite worrying. And
right, and not just an ideological one, but an institutional one too.
Yes,
indeed, if the Triple C is not an institutionally strong organization, all ZANU-PF needs to do is beat up, kill, intimidate the new opposition leader, and maybe they can stifle opposition again.
And I've spoken to Zimbabweans who consider Chamisa to be a bit of a lightweight. Comparisons not favorably were made to Musi Maimane, this young, telegenic guy who's a good speaker. But there's the suspicion that if you just scratch the surface, there's no real conviction there. There isn't a strong leader that can really go against a dominant political party. So that's the second takeaway, is that politics in Zimbabwe, at least opposition politics, still very much personality politics, and there isn't the structural, institutional, organizational opposition to it, which is actually quite sad. And then the third thing is that this thing was sold as a sort of dry run for the elections in 2023. Well, in which case ZANU-PF will expand its majority if this was a dry run. Because let's get some perspective here. The National Assembly of Zimbabwe has 270 seats, and the Triple C has 19 seats out of 270. So to try and see this win as some miraculous change is, I think, irresponsible. I think it's lazy. It's narrative pushing. But I do like Zimbabwean politics in a way. I do like the electoral system. I do like the fact that it isn't just about pleasing the party bosses. It is there's a stronger voter loyalty to a representative. For example, in some of these seats, formerly MDC candidates stood as CTC candidates and were elected. So that sort of indicates that the fact that they served that constituency, irrespective of the party loyalty, created a connection between voter and representative. That, I think, is a healthy thing. It's not a silver bullet, but it might be a bullet.
So very, very quickly before I move on to your final thoughts, Marius, Hermann, I see there was a comment in the chat here. What do you think of the chances of the EFF surviving if Juju wasn't there?
I mean, it's probably 60-40 that it peters out. I have a personal little test for political parties. Can you remove its current leader and still see the party contesting the next election? Action SA, I don't think is a real party. It seems to me a personality cult. You take Herman Mashaba out of that, and I don't think you're left with much. IFP clearly struggling to survive the departure of Buthelezi. The ANC is a political party. It will contest the next election no matter who its leader is. Same with the DA. The ACDP might be a sort of a borderline case, even though it's only ever had one leader in its entire existence. The EFF, I think, is if a smart leader were to capture the socialist ideology and the decolonial critical race theory angle, then the party might have a legitimate vehicle. It could be the legitimate, unique contribution that party makes, contribution in its loosest sense, to South African politics. Someone might actually do it better than Julius Malema, even though he is certainly the most talented politician in the country. So I think it's a close call, but probably if Malema goes, the EFF will sort of collapse over time. But there is a possibility that someone with enough political savvy could actually follow him up with great success.
Although I suspect Julius has made sure to make sure that person is not in the EFF. I'd
like to disagree with Herman, and I say I think if Julius Malema left, there's a 90% chance that the EFF will collapse. I think. I mean, by 2030,
I think it's exactly because Julius has made sure that no one of any talent could be in the party to challenge him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
And but I mean, that's the kind of ideology that the EFF pushes isn't new in South Africa. We've had parties pushing something that PAC is pretty much, and the ANC Youth League, kind of thing. Exactly,
which is what the EFF is.
Exactly, and the PAC hasn't got more than 1% of the votes since 1999. But I think the only reason EFF support is partly, I think it's because Julius Malema is, as you say, he's a very good politician, and I think he's just got a good sense of occasion and so on, and good eye of spectacle and so on. I think that's what's got the party going. You'd probably be getting 10% of the vote if he was also being a pro-free market guy as well. You know what I mean?
Perhaps I might be committing the typical think tank sin here and just looking at the theory. But I do think theoretically, ideologically, the EFF can make a unique contribution. And that's sort of the reason I think it can be a political party without juju. But I might be completely mistaken. And the real politic that Nick points out is Julius Malema, being as politically savvy as he is unlikely to allow competing factions or power bases to form within his party that can challenge him to any degree. It's interesting. The EFF has the highest MP, Member of Parliament, turnaround of all parties. Go look at the people that were elected at the first election, then follow them whether they were elected in the second election, and then through to 2019. And you will see that, that list changes
the EFF goes through
a lot. So yeah, it's ideologically yes, practically probably no.
Yeah, no, they have the weakest job security in the country. Marius, we've stayed quite a long time on this topic. Briefly, what do you think are the choices the lessons from what's going on in Zim at the moment for South Africa?
Well, I think it's just shows what's happened to the opposition. The opposition is pretty much, not collapsed, but the main opposition has, and had to be, and people who still want to have a
reconstituted.
Party, exactly, to create a new vehicle for it. And it seems that what's left of the MDC is pretty much being captured by what are effectively people controlled by ZANU-PF. So, and that's why a lot of these guys started to leave, and that's also why these by-elections were called, because people were expelled from MDC, and that's why they had to rerun these elections and so on. So, I think it also shows that it can be quite hard to be in opposition. I can't remember who it was, but somebody said it's very cold outside the ANC. I don't think it's cold as it was 10 or 15 years ago, but it still is. And I think it's probably also pretty cold outside the ZANU-PF, but also getting warmer. And I think ZANU-PF probably has to be a bit worried, I think. But it's going to take a very big effort by the opposition to overthrow ZANU-PF in 2023. Same as the story in South Africa. But I do think the ANC and ZANU-PF are both now in borrowed time. And, in 3 elections, definitely ZANU-PF will be out in the next election. ANC will be very close to being out in the next election, definitely by 2029.
Right. So I'm going to go a little bit off the structure for the episode that we plan to do here. And I just want to, there's an interesting question here asked by David. And he said, wonder if Endluck started a party, whether he would get more support than the EFF. So he's talking about the head of Operation Tudula. And we actually weren't going to talk about this today, but the head of Operation Tudula was arrested recently, and he's been, I think he's just got 1,500 Rand bail. And this was for accusations of property theft and vandalism and vigilantism, basically. Anyway, he spoke to his supporters arrayed in military fatigue, saying he will die for his cause of driving out the foreigners or whatever it was. And I think this is a really important question in South African politics now. Herman, just sort of off the cuff, without having thought about it too much, do you think that there's a big opportunity here for someone like that to take over? I mean, presumably this is what Action SA has been going after, but someone like Lux could be a dangerous force in South African politics. What do you think?
I think so. I wouldn't go so far as to think he can take over, nor do I think it's really realistic to think that his party will be bigger than the EFF. But clearly the guy is talented in terms of generating publicity, a leader who can get people to join in a cause, as I think misguided and wrong-headed as that cause is. The question, and this is real unknown, well, it's a known unknown, is we have pretty good ideas as to where South African, due to the work of the Institute of Race Relations and Center for Risk Analysis and people like R.W. Johnson, we have pretty good ideas as to the priorities and the attitudes of South Africans. We know how they feel about education, race, jobs, things like that. One thing that I think has been insufficiently polled and insufficiently explored is the fertile ground for a sort of Operation Dudula thing, where South Africans do feel emotionally and politically invested in a sort of a nationalist flex, thinking that foreigners have a legit are a legitimate concern within the South African spectrum. I'm not convinced of that, but I suspect there might be a sizable chunk, if not very close to a majority, of South Africans who might, from a mere gut feel, see foreigners as enough of a bogeyman to support a political party willing to nail its colors to the mast and have a sort of a nationalist South Africa first policy. I think that would be damaging. I think history quite shows that there are some forms of nationalism and some extents of nationalism that I think is absolutely economically and socially fine. But that's a great unknown. We just don't have the data on where.
Yeah, I think I'd be surprised if there wasn't. I think basically every country on earth has at least 20%, if not more, of their population that's pretty keen on nationalism and pretty not keen on foreigners. So I would be surprised if South Africa was not one of those.
Yeah.
All right. Having spent much longer.
One thing I think we should say is these polls are very good and well, and they give you a very, very good idea, but the questions aren't really weighted for an electoral choice. These things give us a choice as to the priorities and challenges of everyday South Africans, but we don't know which issues actually are the motivating factors between someone pitching to vote and not pitching to vote. That's a different question as to what are your priorities, what do you want the government to focus on, is a different question to what policy is enough to mobilize you to go vote for a political party. Those questions are similar, but not the same, and we just don't have enough data on it. So it's possible that a majority of South Africans do feel have this, fear of the Johnny Foreigner effect. But it might not be a sufficient electoral or political motivator to give Operation Dudula, political capacity as a political party or a political movement.
Indeed. Oh, very good point there. All right, let's move on to our next topic today. And this is another, unfortunately, disinvestment story from South Africa. Bell Equipment, which is a company founded in 1954 in KZN, which has its main manufacturing plant, I think, in Richards Bay. They make what are called articulated dump trucks. I'm not being an engineering technical person. I'm not very clear as to what those are, but heavy machinery, basically. This company has decided that they are going to be leaving South Africa. In a statement, they said, so most of their customers are in the Northern Hemisphere, in countries like Germany or the US. In a statement, the company said, to safeguard the long-term sustainability of the group, a growth plan is in place to ensure that Bell ADTs, our highest volume products sold predominantly into Northern Hemisphere markets, are less exposed to risks presented by the volatility of the South African landscape going forward. Consequently, over time, more aspects of our manufacturing will shift to the Northern Hemisphere. It went on to, give the usual platitudes that companies give. It was committed to South Africa as a local manufacturer and is confident of South African opportunities and blah, 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 blah. But the reality here is that we are losing manufacturing jobs, which, any jobs at this point in South Africa are sorely needed. As we forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, latest unemployment figures are out. Official unemployment is slightly up, and unofficial unemployment, which is the expanded definition, is very slightly down. So basically, it's at the same place it was, which is one of the highest places it's ever been. I can't remember the exact figures, but I think the official is 36.6 or so percent, something like that. Anyway, and the expanded definition is 46 or so. So crazy stuff. Herman, let me start with you. Not surprising, terribly, that we're losing yet more manufacturing. What are your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, I mean, this is a rerun of I mean, we've seen this film before, but like a typical sequel, it needs to go greater. Where Clover moved from one place in South Africa to the other place in South Africa. This time it's global. One South African company is moving away from South Africa to a different place, but and it's for the reasons we've highlighted. It is infrastructural failure, an unstable power supply, unreliable water supply, bad circumstances when it comes to law and order, safety, security. All of these things accumulate.
If you're a company in KZN, you look at the July riots and you think, if that happens again.
Yes, but what animates me the most about this particular story is the tepidity of these bloody companies. They are leaving South Africa, but not even on their way out the door, do they have the testicular fortitude or the guts to say, the reason we are leaving is because crime is out of control, because race-based policies make it impossible for people to invest, because local government under the current ruling party in most places is so inept that one can't invest there. No, they couch it in these careful diplomatic nonsense cocktail terms of to avoid volatility. I mean, just for once have the courage to put your money where your mouth is, or at least your money where your mouth used to be. Call a spade and say what happened here was local government became an unreliable partner in the necessity of having an infrastructure or an environment where to do business. Investment policies were killed by BEE, corruption, Ibrahim Patel, and other idiots. Expropriation without compensation made it impossible for anyone to actually consider investing in this country. We don't want to be here. We can't be here. We're a business. We want to make profit. And if you dare for 1 second say that this is sort of an investment strike, as Bladen Zimande and other commie arseholes are fond of doing, then perhaps kiss our rears as we leave for the North American continent, where people might slightly appreciate the contribution we make to employment and problem solving. Just for once, could one company have guts to say that? But no, it's always sort of, oh, we have full confidence. Oh, take your confidence to North America and shove it, don't you?
I don't know how you're going to follow that up, Marius, but perhaps some wise words from.
I'm going to disagree with Hermann a little bit. Like, I think it's easy for us to say, sit here on our podcast and say, you guys must be brave and do this. We don't know really what happens behind the scenes. And I think they pretty
Marius,
much.
we do that.
Yes, I know. But we're not running a massive company that has to maybe rely on the government for permits and all that kind of thing. But
they were just following orders. I mean, we're veering close to the famous Nuremberg excuse.
Yeah, I must
comment from this Anthony Norman says and I think that you can say as much as you want. Now this company is taking all this money offshore. It's taking away all these jobs. And I mean, that's a kick in the pants for the ANC government. And I mean, I think it's telling that they're going to Germany. They're not going to somewhere else that's a fairly low wage place, say like Thailand or whatever, Mexico or something. They're going to Germany where, people, if you're doing a normal low level manufacturing job, you're earning probably 70 or 80,000 rand a month. So just shows you that, and we've always get told South Africa is actually a great destination. We fairly low cost, and we have a fairly large amount of skills, but shows you that's simply not true. And people aren't going to hang around here for all the reasons you pointed out, Herman. And I think Richards Bay is also, at Richards Bay Minerals, there was that manager killed last year, a guy called Nico Swart. And what kind of place is going to invest where your managers are getting shot dead? And it's different with that because that was a mining company. You can't just pick up a mine and move it to Germany, but a manufacturing plant you can. And that's exactly what Bell Equipment's done. And I don't think anybody can blame them, especially after what's been happening in the country. And despite everything Cyril Ramaphosa says about investment, blah, 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 whatever, until you get the environment right, nobody's going to come invest here, and you can't really blame anybody. And that's, remember, there are people behind these people that are losing jobs. And it's obviously not great. And sorry, just the last point, also is the economic multipliers that come from a manufacturing job. I think a lot more than, say, from somebody doing a job as a janitor or whatever the case.
So just on that first point that you made, Marius, I'm going to side a little bit with Hermann on this one. I agree that, businessmen, they're not exactly used to fighting political battles. So I can kind of understand why they might not want to go full Hermann on the government here. But at the same time, they didn't have to say, oh, but we're so committed to South Africa as a local manufacturing destination. They could say it by omitting it. You know what I mean? They could be a little bit stronger.
And just in these last few seconds that I have, I spent 2 years campaigning for the Institute, amongst other things, against prescribed assets, where we knew that financial and asset management companies were blatantly colluding with the presidency to make it possible for prescribed assets to become a policy. Were it not for our campaign, that would have happened. We poisoned that policy. For 2 years, we did that. Then other day, we have Adrian Gore, the closest thing South Africa has to a Bond villain and the closest thing Cyril Ramaphosa has to a colonoscopy, saying that South Africa, stop the negativity. It's a great place. I mean, based on what? But based on what would you want someone here to invest, Mr. Gore? And might I ask you, while I'm on the subject, where in bloody hell is your assets housed? Are you worried about what's going to happen to your personal wealth, or is it perhaps conveniently stashed? So, yeah.
Well, his wealth's in the cable a long time ago.
I think I agree with one of our posters here. We need to have like a theme song, an introductory theme song for Hermann before he says something, because it's always there's a good amount of vigor and vim. Anyway, we are out of time, unfortunately, so I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you tomorrow on the Daily Friend Show. Have a most wonderful and excellent day, everyone. Cheers.